Do you feel like this happens to you a lot? You're stomping the lane phase, everything seems to be going quite well, and then in a matter of seconds, you're dead, and you don't really understand why. This is a problem that plagues so many players, and the reason why is a bit silly. Everyone is forgetting one basic concept that would help them avoid throwing their leads. In this guide, we're going to cover this issue so that when you get ahead in lane, you stay ahead more often. Let's get into it. Getting into our first matchup, we've got a Jinx and Sona duo versus a Jhin and Morgana. When building a game plan for the lane phase, it's fair to say that you should usually look at the supports more so than the ADC matchup. So let's focus on Sona versus Morgana. Both of them are enchanter supports, but Morgana has something very important about her kit that both sides want to play around, her Q. Based on that, what do you think should be the game plan for both sides of this lane to get an edge over their opponents? Getting a minion advantage should be your immediate answer. As always, whenever there is a skill shot based support in the lane, more often than not you should want to get wave control. In Jin's case, he wants to make it easier for Morgana to land her Q by having a minion advantage. That way there's less things for Jinx and Sona to hide behind. And in Jinx's case, she wants wave control because if Morgana can't land Q, she's about as useless as shoes for a snake. Utterly worthless. We cover this concept all the time, and once you think about it, it's super obvious, isn't it? Well, let's see just how obvious it is as you watch this lane unfold. And try and see if you can guess what elo you're watching based on everything you see. Initially during the lane, the game plan we discussed is precisely what Jhin plays for. He aggressively pushes the first few waves, giving him complete control. Not much came from it since Morgana missed her Qs, but the potential for big damage or even a kill was there just from the threat of one ever landing. What happens next is unfortunate, but definitely a good lesson. If you're going to be pushing aggressively in any matchup, then don't forget to ward. Jhin and Morgana had a lot of pressure, but the enemy Hecarim adapted his path and came to punish them for playing so far up in the lane. Despite being ganked though, Jhin just goes right back to the initial game plan. Once he's certain that Hecarim is gone, he once again begins trying to push the wave and enable his Morgana to land a bind. Unfortunately, this plan will be a bit short-lived. Hecarim's pressure alleviated Jin's control over the wave, so slowly but surely, Jinx started changing the flow of the lane. And we arrive at this precise moment. Let's take in everything we've seen so far. Outside of the gank, Jhin and Morgana have had insane amounts of pressure, right? It's felt like there's very little the enemy bot could have done to fight back on their own. And that's all because they've maintained wave control throughout most of the lane, which is the thing we first discussed. So take a look at the wave right now. Is Jhin going to be able to maintain his push lead for much longer? Probably not. Jinx's reinforcing wave is coming in sooner than the red one. Unless Jhin and Morgana both start very aggressively hitting the wave, which is unlikely, Jinx is bound to get lane control. This is such a basic and simple concept. Surely Jhin will adapt his playstyle and realize that he can't pressure anymore. As if. He continues playing aggressively and is probably wondering why everything seems so difficult now. From his perspective, it probably feels like Jinx got a hotfix buff mid-game because she's now completely dominating the lane. Whereas before she was hesitant to trade, she's now trading as aggressively as possible. Jinx turning up the aggression here would lead you to believe that she's aware of why she's winning now. Surely, once she loses the wave advantage, she'll readapt and go back to playing a bit safer. With Sona, there's very few times where you can play aggressive in most matchups. Let's see. So, as her wave, which by the way was the only thing serving as a buffer from Morgana's Q, very slowly dies in front of her eyes, Jinx continues to play in her opponent's faces. This prompts her Sona to walk up with her, and in a shocking turn of events, Morgana manages to land a bind. That's one kill for the red team. Clearly, this is support diff, which results in Jinx tilting off the face of the earth and handing yet another kill over to the very deserving Jhin and Morgana. Do you see where we're going with this? This was a high platinum elo game, and players are still not asking themselves the most important question they need to ask every game. Why am I winning right now? All too often, like this example, we see players get overly excited at how much control they have over the lane, but it feels like they don't really understand why they had control in the first place. And because they weren't thinking about it, when their advantage goes away, they instantly lose. It's crazy how apparent it is every single time we review a low elo replay. Let's take a look at another example where this occurs. Next we have Ezreal with Leona versus Jhin and Yuumi. If this was a 1v1, Ezreal scales well versus the Jhin and could win by playing passive. However, with the Leona by his side, who gets massively outscaled by the opposing Yuumi, Ezreal must play super aggressive to make use of his Leona's powerful early game. As for Jhin and Yuumi, they'll generally want to maintain their range and land a bit of poke to fend off the all-ins so they can scale. Let's watch what happens, and while you're watching, try to guess the elo which this game is from. Again, it may seriously surprise you. Ezreal immediately starts hitting the wave as he gets into the lane. Quick question, why do you think he's doing so? Generally, with the melee support versus ranged one, you have to concede the first few levels due to the range disadvantage. You play safe, then at level 2 or 3, you can play aggressively once your support is useful. But because most Yuumi players just sit AFK on their ADC, he could actually compete with the push early on. Having wave control enables Leona to slowly but surely walk up to get a stun onto the enemy Jhin. The outcome is not the greatest trade ever, but because they're an all-in lane versus a weak duo, getting Jhin lowish to go for the kill later isn't bad in the long run. This earlier trade pays off big time a bit later on as Ezreal gets level 2. Because Jhin was already chunked out a bit, he can E forward on his own and get a huge trade-off. It'd take a massive blunder for Ezreal to throw his lead from here. Something foreshadowing. By getting the Jhin so low, this prompts Leona to go for a great play of her own. She lands an E onto Jhin and immediately ignites for the kill. It takes 4 summoner spells, Barrier, Flash, Exhaust, and Heal to keep Jhin barely alive. We will say that the play Ezreal and Leona should have made together is to build up a big slow push and then tower dive the Jhin. This would be ideal as it's an actual coordinated play, rather than the solo plays both Ezreal and Leona have gone for so far. But if you're Ezreal, you definitely can't be upset that your Leona did this either. Again, 4 summoner spells down means that the enemy bot should be much easier to kill now. The all-ins allow Ezreal to easily crash a big wave into Jin's tower, and here comes the big decision that will cost Ezreal the win. What would you do from this position? Think back to what both sides want to do or are capable of doing. Recalling is 100% the correct answer here. When waves crash into your opponent's tower, as you know, it results in a bounce back slow push. But keep in mind that those slow pushes occur very close to your opponent's tower. You cannot all in your opponent while the wave is like this. Almost every single melee engaged support would struggle in these types of situations. Basically, the wave is in the perfect spot where Jhin can keep the wave close to his tower, enabling his own Yuumi to slowly land poke and heal him back up. Meanwhile, Ezreal and Leona were already fairly low from their previous fights. They can't commit to an all-in, and every bit of poke is slowly but surely getting them low enough to where they can't lane anymore. Eventually, having lost complete control of the lane, Jhin and Yuumi managed to crash the wave into Ezreal's tower and get a recall of their own. It's fair to say that shouldn't be happening for free in this matchup. After nearly 8 minutes of not being able to accomplish anything, the fact that Ezreal and Leona are tilted is very clearly visible. All they can do is watch as Yuumi and Jhin have the freest laning phase of their lives. Not only do Ezreal and Leona get outscaled in bot, but in every single lane as well. Their frustration clearly leads to this ridiculous engage, and it's fair to say that the game is over from here. Going back to the game-losing moment, the entire lane would have looked much more different had Ezreal just recalled during this crash. Once again, it feels like the ADC wasn't really thinking about why he was winning in the first place. During the early levels, Ezreal was in control due to how weak Yuumi's early game is compared to Leona. Not only that, but it was also because the wave was in a location where he and Leona could actually find engages. But obviously all those advantages go away right after a crash, as we discussed. If Ezreal remembered his win condition, he'd take a recall, which accomplishes 2 things. 1, he and Leona restore their health bars so they can actually look for fights. Not only that, but the waves would be frozen closer to their side of the lane when they got back. This would give Leona the ability to ignore Yuumi and Jin's poke long enough to look for another all-in on their side of the lane. And even if Leona doesn't find an engage and they don't score a kill, Jhin would have to take a horrible base timing. Either way, the lane would be horrible for Jhin and Yuumi, and Ezreal's lead should have been massive. Oh, and for those who guessed the elo, this was a Imagine how high you could climb if you literally just apply the basic fundamentals we talk about all the time. We know this may not be some revolutionary concept, but at the same time, it is absolutely ridiculous how often we see even very high elo players lose this way. You need to always attempt to remind yourself of why you're winning a lane matchup. Is it the wave, your levels, your items? Unless you know, then these kind of losses will just keep repeating themselves again and again. For example, as we've seen here, this Masters elo Twitch has had complete control over the wave during this lane phase. This has given him a ridiculous level of confidence that is only because of Twitch and Xerath's superior wave clear compared to Kai'Sa and Nami. They can't do anything unless Twitch literally walks into them. His lack of respect causes him to step a bit too far forward in lane, and he's instantly dead. Yet again, another ADC who loses his advantage from not understanding why he was winning in the first place. who has initiative in League can oftentimes go back and forth throughout a game. When you're the one in the winning position, remember to always remind yourself why that's the case. Do so more often and you'll find you throw your lead significantly less often than these players.
Now, what you find here on YouTube is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to unlock your true potential, then you need to dive into Skillcapped.com. We have the largest catalog of League of Legends guides in the entire world, with over 1,500 guides and 350 unique courses. You get brand new guides every week exclusive to our website, along with our Smurf commentaries where our challenger experts walk you through how to carry out of the exact rank you're stuck in. Still unsure? Well, you can have all your questions answered by those same challenger experts. Need one-on-one coaching? We got you covered with hand-picked coaches trained to the highest standard. Don't have time for that? Use Direct Pro, pick a past game you played, and within 24 hours get a personalized video from a top 100 challenger player breaking down exactly what you can do better. The best part, all of this comes with a rank improvement guarantee. If you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using Skillcapped, you can claim a refund, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Head to Skillcapped.com and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below.
Anyway, that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching and see you soon.